my first employee, Miles Mileto. I'll never forget it. And I thought, wow, I can do all this work, but I can get him to do this. And that's where it kind of started with, how do you motivate people? It's all well and fine. You've got all this knowledge and you can read books, but if you don't teach it to others and practice it. So the franchise that I got involved with was Bob Burnham, the very beginning. And Bob and he was a mentor to me early on. Why? Because I could talk with him about the books that he's reading, that I'm reading, and we had this great mindset, this like what's his name, Napoleon talks about, right? The mastermind. And back then you couldn't just go on the internet. There was no internet where there was no coaches. Your books were your mentors.
Welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. I have Jeff McCallum here on our call today. Super pumped to have him and hear about his story and success, just because he's been in the service-based industry, just an amazing guy. He's an author. He's a musician. He's a family man. He has kids, grandkids. Like, he is a very cool guy to sit and talk with. He's also into fitness now with this fitness transformation he's done. We'll dive into some of those things together. And then in his coaching company that he has, helping business owners that are in the service-based industry. Before we go into his life, I really want to just mention that we have a free gift down below in the show notes. I want you to make sure you're able to get to this. Most people want to build an authority online, but they're just have missing pieces around what it takes to market their company and to know what it looks like to build sales teams and doing it right. So if you want to know about that training, check it out below. It's my gift to you. I want to make sure that you're able to check that out. Jeff, super glad you're here. Jumping right into the conversation here. What does high performance mean to you? What does that look like? The day-to-day life?
Hey, Nathan, pleasure to be here. What does high performance mean to me? It is probably, in the circles that you run, it's probably boring to you, but to me, it's discipline and consistency and all the above. And for years, I don't even think I could actually label what I was doing. I didn't know until I would say the last couple of years what that actually meant. I thought everyone was like me, but apparently not. When it comes to, for me, that's it. Consistency and discipline.
I love that. You do in your lifetime, you've done quite a few different things. You've exited, a few service-based businesses, you're a coaching company, you're a family man, you do fitness. Like, tell us what you do right now that you're helping and serving people so they can really get a good understanding about who they're talking to and listening to here.
Well, I think I want to show as an example to people that are, my age. I'm 62. And when I get a lot of young people ask me, well, how'd you do it? They see the vehicles, they see the house, they see my success, and they're like, hey, well, how did you do it, Jeff? And I want to be that example that I, similar to Dan Martell. Dan Martell is my mentor. I love hanging with him because he's got a great vibe. Well, I've got the same, I like to think, at 62. So I want to, for me, it's anything I learn. If I can teach that through the group coaching, I prefer that. One-on-one is good. If you can nail me down for one-on-one, great. I've done a few of those, but I prefer the group coaching because life is about learning. And then if you can learn, if you can spend the time learning new things and teach, of course, that just drives a point home. So I think that's really, and again, that can be all the different weird businesses that I've been in. I've got a little experience in all these different, especially the service industry, but people industry. I love leadership. I love mentoring. The whole reason for getting into coaching and consulting was my years of experience with other business owners, but mainly employees. Anytime I hired an employee, I was a good mentor to them. I've got people in the companies that I sold, 4 years back that are still in the company. They're pushing 20 years, some of these people. And I know it had to do with culture. And I know that came from teaching leadership and actually listening to people and caring for where they wanted to go, type of thing. Human potentiality. Love it, man.
I love that. Well, I want to dive into a little bit more on that in a minute. But before you guys listen here, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to write a review because we're going to dive into some of the story of Jeff's life here that is going to be really interesting. But I just want to make sure you're able to do that before we dive in here any further here. But Jeff, like the success that you have now, it all started at the very beginning. Like you just recently you had mentioned that you kind of discovered that you're a little bit different than most. And it was just you were running at the degree that you were running at. You had
Yeah.
the pace that you were running at. Your wife probably just accepted like this is probably who you are, what you're about. But I can imagine she married you in the pace that you're running at, and you're realizing, hey, I'm a high achiever. I'm a high level type of person. But like bring us back to the very beginning as you're kind of reminiscing on your life as a 62 years old, and going back to the early teens or 20s, or when you realize, hey, I'm a little bit different. I run at a different pace, or I have some different vision or goals. Where did that all begin? Where did that kind of start taking shape?
I think it really took shape for me when I was working at a gas plant up north in the trades. And I got a taste of I have zero mechanical aptitude. And I knew that when I out of high school because I was a musician. What was I doing? Well, I was in band practice all the time and it was all about music. I had big dreams. I wanted to be a rock star. 80,000 people, outdoor coliseum. That was my
Mm,
goal. So along with that, a lot of people mock you for that kind of thing when you're younger, right? And of course, for me back, it was like late 70s and 80s. There wasn't a lot of direction back then like there is now. It was like, hey, you either go to school and follow the trade path and get a job and be like the rest. But it was in the gas plant. I'll never forget it. Sitting at the lunch table with all these other people that you could tell were just unhappy. And
mm.
that came through with, the smoking and the complaining about their family and all this other stuff. And these were young guys. And I thought, I'm not going to get caught in that trap. So I knew early on that was not me. And I knew that once I read I think it was Wayne Dyer's book, either Erroneous Zones or no, it was Pulling Your Own Strings by Wayne Dyer. My brother gave it to me. And then I read Magic of Believing. And then I realized you could change your destiny anytime you want it and you could control it. And
Mm.
then I knew when I started reading these books, I thought, yeah, now I know what I need to do. I'm okay. It's okay to dream big. It's okay to be a little bit whacked, and it's okay to get criticized all the time. For
What age were you at that time?
geez, I was like, okay, so I graduated in my 20s. It was
Your
like
20s.
early 20s. I didn't start early. I was always a big dreamer, man. I spent a lot of time at jobs I did not like, but I was lucky that I could get out of that gas plant and go south and I bought a little business and got that going and learned how paperwork worked. And I bought a taxi business. Out of
Mm.
all that taught me empathy for people. And it also taught me, I became cynical after a couple of years, but it taught me how to hire people, how to do paperwork, how cash flow worked, everything. It was almost learning the hard way and being around people that are sort of, lack of a better term, downtrodden. They have no cash. So they're taking taxis everywhere. There wasn't Uber and. So it was interesting. I just thought, I'm getting out of the north. I got to go do this. So I had no other,
And when
you
did you get married? Is this at the same time you were married at that time?
that was early 80s that I had the
Okay.
tax thing. And then after that, I met my wife. When I met my wife, we moved to Victoria, and that's where I started the one service company. And
Okay.
that service company, I was lucky enough that um, it was a carpet cleaning company. And from that, we went into restoration right away. And restoration was not known at the time. Nobody
Mm.
really knew what restoration was. You called a carpet cleaning company to extract your water from your basement when there was a flood. You didn't think about putting it back to get well, a carpenter's going to do that, right? This is how
Yeah.
you. So I was lucky enough to stay in that business long enough, and I grew with it. And then, of course, I'll get into the other stuff later about the niche companies that came off that. But it did millions, and then we ended up starting some other company offshoots of that, which I really love. I
Yeah.
love the whole talk about little niche businesses
Yeah,
and everything.
let's talk about that because I
Yeah.
think most of the time people think of, hey, I got to be in a create a business that's sexy or, be a part of a business. Like you chose, and you had mentioned this is like they're quote unquote boring companies, but they're like they're needed companies, and you bought one and then you built one, it sounded like, when you moved to Victoria, Canada. But like, tell us a little bit about that. Like, it's
Well,
not
okay,
something you were necessarily proud of. Like when you had a conversation with your wife, like, hey, I'm in the cleaning business. Like,
yeah.
it's not something that you always like are high and mighty saying, "Ah, man, I'm talking about this." Like, what got you into something like that to decide and lean in and go all in with that type of a business?
Well, funny you say that. It's like you're absolutely nailed it on the head. These are unsexy businesses. I've always seemed to have a second job. When I left when I met my wife, I was in a pest control company. I worked for a pest control company, and on the side, I had a janitor company with a
Mm,
buddy. He had contracts for Canada Post and all these different, uh, some real estate companies and stuff. And so contracts were cool. I mean, even bad, we used to steal equipment from one anyway and go wet polish a floor, this type of thing. But I learned, I was just always working back then. And it was, and they were all unsexy businesses. And my wife's fine with whatever, but my business partner from the restoration early on, his wife, they'd go out to dinner parties and they'd say, "Oh, what do you do?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm a carpet cleaner." And it used to drive his wife crazy. But I have no problems with that.
yeah.
Unsexy businesses made me millions of dollars. So it started out with a janitor business. Then the carpet cleaning was a franchise that my brother was in, and it was up and coming. And we're talking about when carpet cleaning companies had no truck mounted units. It was
Mm.
literally 1986 when those things were introduced. Before they were using floor polishers. So I was kind of lucky to get into that as well, because as soon as you get a truck mount, you just made way more money. Anyhow, that's kind of how is this always having this side hustle for me
How did
was
you see the writing on the wall of that blue ocean that turned into huge, like before restoration companies, and now those are big things. Like there's so many different restoration here in the States, especially. That's a big contracts to get. Like, and you were a pioneer in that, and you saw the writing on the wall. How did you see that out of all the different service based businesses that you could have started or did? Why
well
start that?
I remember this clear as day. It was 1990 and I moved to Victoria and I bought into a franchise, small franchise. And the guy that had it before me had a file this thick in the Better Business Bureau on how kind of abusive he was to clients. So I didn't really have, lack of a better term, a hope in hell to get this company going. But one thing I found out was I had one person phone me one day and say, "I have water in my basement." I thought, okay, well, how do I charge this out? I went over and extracted. Well, once I learned that, we had a storm in Victoria one year, and it was really bad that same year, right? And I phoned up probably every property management company I had, and back then I had a pager, a numeric. That
Mm.
was it, and they'd page me with 911, and I called them on a Friday, got on the phone, phoned as many as I could. By the weekend, I made more money in that weekend than I did all year being in that town. I was only in Victoria one year.
Mm.
Then we moved into where I live now to the Okanagan. And when I got here, I just focused on restoration, one flood after another. When somebody calls you for a claim, that can be thousands of dollars. And back then it was $2,000 or $3,000 for a hot water tank, for example. Now it's, 10 to 15 to 20 grand for just emergency. When I say just emergency, that's your bill just to clean it up.
Mm.
And don't get me started on things like, I know this is weird. This is talk
Yeah.
about unsexy, but body cleanup, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that would
Huge
be.
money niche. So these are really weird niches. There's so many weird niches in the restoration anyway that people don't, anyhow.
Let me ask you this,
Yeah.
as I'm thinking about it. It's like growing a business. I've seen a lot of businesses suffer when it's just them because they don't know how to lead. They don't know how to hire the right people, pay the right people. Or one time it goes sideways, and so they decide, hey, it's just not for me, or they have challenges with an employee. What made that leap for you? Was it that same year that you're like, hey, I can't do this on my own. I got to start building team to be able to really kind of manage this. How did you go about that
Well,
leadership journey and hiring the right people?
my first employee, Miles Mileto, I'll never forget it. And I thought, wow, I can do all this work, but I can get him to do this. And that's where it kind of started with, how do you motivate people? It's all well and fine. You've got all this knowledge and you can read books, but if you don't teach it to others and practice it. So the franchisee, or the franchise that I got involved with, was Bob Burnham, the very beginning. And Bob and I, he was a mentor to me early on. Why? Because I could talk with him about the books that he's reading, that I'm reading, and we could almost, we had this great mindset, this what's his name, Napoleon talks about, right? The mastermind.
Mm.
And back then, you couldn't just go on the internet. There was no internet, where there was no coaches. Your books were your mentors, right? And if you could discuss that with somebody else, I was lucky enough to have Bob in my life for that. And again, when I said to him one day, I said, yeah, carpet cleaning is all well and fine, but I love this restoration. So hired one person, then I hired another one, then I bought another van, then I bought a bigger cube van, and then the rest just took off. But it was, boy, there was years in there where I was starving, I'll be honest, because you wanted to put money into the business. Every time there was a new piece of technology that came out, I needed it. I wanted it because I knew I could make what? More money, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you think about the rental business, for example, that buying another fan is like buying another employee, a fan to dry a building out, right? So I'd go out and buy a desiccant dehumidifier, which would dry a hardwood floor down. Well, you get paid thousands to dry a hardwood floor instead of tearing it out. That stuff I loved. So I did whatever it took to get the right people. And it wasn't easy, man. Business is not easy. People make it sound easy. It's not. It takes time and energy, and it takes focus. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. You don't sit and nobody asks you along the way how you did it. You're just doing your thing. And that all comes from this burning desire that you've had. And I know a lot of self-help people talk about that. It's that you're made for something bigger, better, stronger, faster. Because most entrepreneurs are half crazy and they all have this burning desire. I was just lucky enough to be able to get it out. And I talk. I love talking, and it drives my wife nuts sometimes. We'll go to a dinner party or something, and I'm talking to everybody, and she's type B. I think I could be married to a type A, though, because that type A would drive me nuts. Anyhow, I don't want to get too far off topic, but yeah.
Let me ask you about that characteristic that you have. Like, we entrepreneurs are cut from a different cloth. They're just a different level.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great entrepreneurs that have that drive but fail and then just end up in the weeds and not doing the best. And then there's some people that take that violence and obsession that they have about their vision and their life, and death or high water, like they figure out how to make it happen. How did you go with trying to fix and switch into this, especially with coaching other entrepreneurs and business owners? Like, how do you help coach someone up to have a stronger mental power and strength, as well as like instill that driver and clarity around how to do what they need to do in their business?
I was brought up with a father that was in the Navy, and I always think about him in terms of, my father was black and white. There was no gray. I'm not talking about he'd bounce a quarter off my bed if I didn't make it properly. I'm talking about he was a very empathetic man. He knew people. Like, he could, like, I think I got empathy from him. And this is key for me. When you think about how I got through all that, is I got rid of my ego early. I was a very empathetic person because of my dad, the way he brought me up. I knew that I brought that to my leadership. An example, when I'm in the taxi business, I see people that are downtrodden, and I don't sit there and go, well, look at you. I learned early on how to empathy. I'm going to get there with this answer, but empathy is key, because you have to get out of your own way. First of all, before you can put anything new into your brain, you have to get out of your own way. And most people are caught up with, I got to pay the bills. I look this way. I look that way. You're judging yourself so harshly, you can't get ahead. That's why I think communication is absolute key. And I have a quote that I live by, and everyone at the office used to know this, and it's called, the quote is, would you rather be right or successful? I say that all the time. Do you want to spend your time being right, drawing the line in the sand with people in any conversation, even if you have the answer yourself? It doesn't matter. Success matters. Your success, your mindset, your families. I always worked uh, towards this lifestyle in my brain, what it would look like, right?
Mm.
And nothing was going to stop me from getting there. And I'm telling you, I had to get out of my own way in a lot of instances. Man, I can remember people that, yeah, I won't go there, but
Did
I
that
think
translate into your relationship with your wife? You've been married for how many years now, Jeff?
almost 40. Yeah.
And then you've raised some amazing kids that's
Yeah.
raising amazing grandkids of yours.
Yeah.
And your kids are also entrepreneurs and very skilled and creative people. I see it quite a bit as business owners. They just like they take their obsession they have in their business and nothing else matters, and it destroys their relationships from their
Yeah.
wife and kids. And then they sit back after, they've sold a company. They're like, what was it for? I wasted it. We see examples of this like with Steve Jobs, right? Where he had kids, but none of them want to talk with him, and it was just so obsessed and dented the world, but
Yeah.
at what cost? And now you have a great relationship with your wife and kids. Like, was it that empathy or what was it? Or even the communication, skills that you're talking about that helped bridge that gap where they saw you, they connected with you, they were able to be a part of the journey with you in essence.
Well, I think I've seen both sides of it. When I was earlier, when I had big dreams of being in a band, okay, I was in a band and being a rock star. When you're in a rock star, you're young in the 70s, it was about smoking pot and drinking and being a buffoon, I call it.
Hmm.
When you learn about that lifestyle early on, you realize, well, this isn't the answer. I didn't end up in prison, but I was in jail one night for mouthing off to a cop while I was drunk. I get all that. Everyone's got these sort of downtrodden stories, and I've got mine too. But I don't, I early on, and I don't know what it was. I didn't have goals written down. I just had a vision. And the vision to me was family with balance. I
Hmm.
have this other quote I live by. It's called I love this quote. Whenever I get ahead of myself, whenever I need to be drawn back, I go easy and relaxed manner. I am going to make $1 million in an easy and relaxed manner. That goal, Bob and I wrote out when we had the publishing company. That was another story. And I found that little sheet of paper. It was in my leather day timer. I found that in I think it was 2012 or 15 or something. And we had made that amount of money, and I crossed out and I put 5 million. And then when I pulled it out again in 2020, when you remember when Clubhouse was out, all of a sudden COVID's around, everyone's talking on Clubhouse. Well, it was there where I sort of found that leather binder and I opened it up and realized that I'd sold my companies for over that. And
Hmm.
the quote was, we want to make $1 million in an easy and relaxed manner for the good of all, and forever whoever holds this will get it as well. Something like that. And so that one always rings through. I know it's kind of a long-winded thing,
How
but
many years was that though? Like, I think people think it's like the overnight success, but the years for toward this exit that you had with your success, how many years?
well, the one company, the large company I had for 30 years, one I started in 90, that was 31 years old or something. And the other one that we packaged with it, Norhas Solutions, we started that in 2015. So that was 5-year company. What was really cool about having that one restoration company, I had a different company called Burn Mac off it, Bob Byrne and Jeff McCallum. That was a franchise company where we franchised painting and um, painting and carpet cleaning. So we had these franchises, and during that time, we were gobbling a lot of books. So we started Expert Author Publishing. The reason we started the publishing was because it gave Bob's focus being in Vancouver. He could teach people how to write and publish. We could do seminars. It was nuts. Like we were all over the place, but the ride was awesome because as the restoration company grew, I kind of had to scale back on any of the publishing around 20, I think it was 2016. Bob had a lot to do with it more than I did, but I just couldn't be in both worlds. And besides, restoration at that point was off the charts. Like we were getting so big so fast. That company had 3 locations. It was a lot. And actually, by the time we sold in 2020, we needed another level of executives. And I was like, I'm done. And my sons they wanted to go do, my one son came, he worked for me for about 10 or 12 years as a project manager straight out of university. And he took business 5 years. My oldest took business 5 years, but he became an accountant at a diamond mine up north. And he now is an infrastructure kid, like he's a consultant. And that wasn't their jam. This was something dad started, was a restoration company, and I did it the hard way. So 30 years, but come on, it was 40 years of hardcore, trying this, trying that. But I will say that, man, it's the weirdest niches that I was in. The unsexy main town. What does Cody Sanchez say? She calls it. I've got her book, and I just got a kick out of it because she talks like that. Right? She's
Yeah.
all about businesses that, and I've always thought, Bob and I used to talk about that as well. There's all these businesses out there that nobody knows about. They're unsexy, but they're quietly raking in millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I will plug her for a second here was she said, right now in Japan, there's more companies closing down because that are making millions and millions of dollars, but nobody wants them.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit and give a blanket statement and go, well, nobody wants to work. That's not true. Just things are different.
Yeah.
The winds of the economy have changed. Simple. I'm not going to.
Well, how long did you grind until you saw a stride of success?
Oh, so the restoration company, that's one thing I should have focused on a little more. When I had the restoration company, it was making a lot of money, so we could do the Burn Mac. We could do the expert author publishing. I've always, every time I hired somebody, I could step back, step back, step back. It got ridiculous. By the time 2020 came and when I sold to private equity, I didn't need to be there, and they knew that. So they paid me out. Bye-bye. But they did give me a little salary for non-compete for a couple of years. But at that point, and I used to say this in the office, they'd say, Jeff, you quit 10 years ago, but you didn't tell anybody. I got complacent. I'll be honest. I got complacent probably 2015 and on. And when we started that second company, I had a couple partners, and two in particular, my sons, and they had other stuff on the go as well, because they both have construction companies now, right? They build homes and spec homes and all this other. But yeah, I quit 10 years ago because all I was doing in the company was I had all these relationships with adjusters and brokers and stuff, and I had a box at the event center. So I'd go watch hockey and I'd go, have beer. It was not me. It was not me.
Mm.
That life of let's go have a beer and do this. It was me at the time, but I grew way beyond that. Sometimes I'm careful about even talking about my past because the past is a past, because I'm just forward into the future. And I'll never forget Dan Martell said to me one day, he goes, Jeff, you're like who did he say? I laughed at this. He goes, you're like a guy that I used to go to school with 26 years ago. You're still talking about the same thing. It's like the exits. He goes, what's new? What's up and coming? And I'm on that. And that's why I just joined again for another year as elite coaching, because it's like, I want to hang out with the right people, man, because you get to pick and choose who influences you.
That's right. What was the awakening factor then for you on that? Like, what was the line in the sand moment for you? Because I know after people hit some strides, it's like they could sit in their laurels and chill. But what was something that kind of rattled you, that kind of gave you clarity of like, hey, I need to move forward and get bigger, get better, get clarity, and making some of those big shifts?
Well, actually, and when I would sub everything out every time. I mean, it literally started in my mindset of, oh, well, I can always go back in the truck if I can't be manager. And then once I became, hired a manager, well, I can always be manager if I went back and forth in my head like this. And I just woke up one day and said, I didn't have an office at any of these locations. I had an office at home. I'd go to these locations and people would be all over me for the hours that I was in there. And I just kind of lost the I had built it to a point, and that was it. And I knew that we had all these locations. This is perfect time to get out and do what I really want to do. And that's teach other people, be there for other people with an empathetic ear, and help. People have got so much potential. They don't realize that And I've proven that at 62, I work out every day and I feel really good. I push my body at 62. Dan even said this to me the other day, and I give him kudos for this. He says, Jeff, you're at the top of your peer chain. You got to go find some new people. I'm not going to be the guy that's sitting on the golf course at 63 twiddling my thumbs. Yeah. Anyway, for me,
does it feel good and different to be able to say I can do that?
well, I'll tell you, sometimes when you get doubtful about what you're doing, because I'm hard on myself. Like when I say I'm hard on myself, all entrepreneurs are. If you're over here doing this, your mind's over here going, well, I should be doing this.
Yeah.
And you're always chasing your tail. And for years, I was used to that. When the restoration industry that I was in, you had to be 12 steps ahead of the customer so that you didn't want the customer phoning you or the adjuster complaining, right? You'd be in bed going, okay, well, you're in bed thinking about, are you going to make payroll the next day when you're really stretched out there financially? But then when it comes to customer service, which by the way, I built my whole business on customer service. I mean, I ran a company out of town because of customer service. And again, that comes down to, I'm going to say that word again, empathy for people.
Mm.
And I can't emphasize that enough. So anyhow, yeah, when you ask, where did it probably 3 years where I finally woke up and just said, dude, I got to move on. I know I answered that once, but there's no sort of, yeah.
So you're
And
coaching now.
one other thing too.
Yeah.
When you turn 40, when you turn 50, and when you turn 60. You just know. If you're doing it right, And does that mean it's almost like I find this business online coaching consulting completely different than brick and mortar for me. Brick and mortar was like pick up the phone, take somebody in an office where this is different. You got to email, you have to WhatsApp, you have to all these. It's different for me.
Yeah.
I have a virtual assistant, and that's fine. I've been at this for about 2 years almost, but I'm interested in learning, and I'm interested.
Yeah.
But you're right. I could easily just go sit on the golf course and enjoy my wealth as well.
Well, I mean, there's sometimes the thought of like, hey, it's a mindset shift. Either I can lose it, right? Or, hey, I haven't arrived yet, so I'm still pushing for something. And now that you got there, you're like, now what? And now you're pushing forward with realizing, hey, there's even more hill to climb, which is very cool because you're creating a new version of Jeff. And ways that you can impact more people.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, it's an ongoing battle, man.
What are some things that you teach now your students? So if there's some service-based entrepreneurs here that either want to get into these, non-sexy business, service-based businesses and or that are right now, and they want to connect with you further, like what are some of these principles or habits that you would teach them to really help them achieve that success that you've achieved?
Well, listen, the first thing I'm going to talk about is where's your health at? Where are you at? What are your goals for your family? What are your goals for yourself? Let's talk about goals. What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term? And what are your BHAGs?
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised that a lot of people don't know what those are. Big, hairy, audacious goal. What is it? Well, I want to have 5 vans and I want to have, a lot of people that approach me in this industry are always like, if I could just get so many more employees, then I can just do this, right? It's like, yes, I can help you get there, but you just have to have a plan because a lot of guys have the talent to go out there. You take a plumber, for example, roofing guy, whatever. All these guys have got talent to do the work, but their big excuse is they don't have time, right? Hence the reason Dan wrote that book, Buy Back Time. Beautiful thing, right? It's hard for a lot of people to wrap their brain around that.
Yeah, it is.
Especially when you're in the thick of it and people owe you money. One of the biggest things I work with people is what happens when they can't say no to work and they can't afford to do the work because they have receivables that are out there so long. They can't seem to get people. That one to me is probably the biggest. Well, I can't find the right people. Well, let's talk about that. I love digging deep with people, finding out what's happening for them personally. Because not one shoe fits all. It just doesn't. I have a company that's actually part of a franchise. And even the franchise won't, they just don't look after this person like they should.
Mm.
So they came to me. It's like, what do you think, Jeff? I said, well, you should do this and this and this. Everything is a different custom fit because, of course, you're always going to do the health mindset. I will do that more now than ever. I do that. I talk to them about being disciplined and consistent and really showing up for yourself. Most people don't honor their own schedule. They break it and then they wonder. You know, here's an example. It's like you get people, when we had the franchise company, had all these franchisees on a Friday, they were all pumped because like the day's ending, the weekend, they're going to enjoy it with their family. By Monday morning, they're burnt out. They come into the meetings Monday morning and they're like, you have to remotivate them for the whole hour in order to introduce a new idea to them. Well, how about you just stay consistent? How about you just discipline? You get what you know what I'm talking
I
about.
do. Yeah.
I could go off the deep end on that one, but there is, it's custom. It is a custom thing with me coaching. It's like, I want to know what makes you tick and what your goals are. Do you want to make more money? Are you making enough money? Are you happy? Some guys are happy at, 2 to 500,000 a year. Some guys want to scale and exit. I was talking to a couple guys this morning and I said, you're starting this company together and one guy's buying into another company. I said, what is your exit strategy? You're young. What does 10 years look like? Because it's going to go by anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If I probably, knowing what I know now, Nathan, I probably would have got out earlier if I knew it just wasn't on my radar. I didn't, I thought, well, I need to keep building, and you'd be
Mm-hmm.
surprised what your business is actually worth, but you
Yeah.
should always be grooming it to sell. And then the
So
other part of it is teaching people in the service industry what other niches they have under their belt that could create profit for them. A lot of them don't see that.
when
They're
do you
just,
diversify then? After you hit one niche and then you
yeah,
diversify? Because that's
again, it depends on the industry. It's like roofing, roofing's roofing.
Mhm.
You could be shingle or you could be tar and gravel. Should you be going after commercial work? Could that be your niche on top of, maybe one commercial a year? You
Yeah.
wet your beak with that. For us, the restoration, we took the asbestos removal segue, took that company, learned everything about we knew the infrastructure, how to build companies, and that company blew up. That went from like 500,000 to millions of dollars in asbestos removal. And that was just a niche off the restoration. And that would not have happened if, we didn't separate it and focus on it solely.
There's a quote, I want to get your thoughts on this, from Jim Rohn. He said, learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. If you work hard on your job, you can make a living. But if you work hard on yourself, you can make a fortune. You're an obsessive
I've
guy.
heard that.
You're an
I love
obsessive guy. You're a learn. You always are learning, always reading books. How important is that for an entrepreneur, even an upcoming entrepreneur, to be obsessive about learning not just the skill of their job, but learning the skill of building and working on themselves?
Wow, that I was thinking about this one the other day. And I think just before we got on the podcast, I mentioned that to you. I didn't, until only the last couple of years that people really asked me, how did you do it? And I had to sort of piece it together. Well, I guess because I read books, and I've always read those type of books. I have
Yeah.
a massive library here, massive. And it's all because, and I just got rid of 6 boxes of books. Sometimes, and here's the problem with books, not the problem, but some people go, well, I read it and I didn't like it. Fine, put it down, go buy another one. Self-help books, the reference books, you keep them forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's only until Audible came out that even ramp everything up in terms of information. But I say, man, the importance of gobbling books is so important. The other one too is getting your ego out of the way and reaching out to the right people.
Mm.
People are afraid of being judged, and they're also afraid of success. Success is scary to people. You figure that if you reach out to somebody, they're going to make you successful. Are you ready for it? Some
Yeah.
just aren't ready for it. But I would say those habits of, man, even if you don't work out, if you don't want to get off the couch, then read. But then don't just hang on to that reading. You have to I call it, you have to go out and teach. You have to guinea pig somebody, you have to, and then that's where the hanging around with the like-minded people, it's a game changer too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Man,
Man,
I
I
believe,
love this conversation that we have together, Jeff, because it's so amazing to kind of get an idea of like who you are, what you're about, what you're trying to accomplish in your future. How can people follow you and connect with you further?
for me, it's Jeff S. McCallum at Jeff S. McCallum on Instagram.
Hmm. Okay.
DM me and I'll reach out to their way. I state that one. I just love it's easiest for me, right?
Yeah.
But
I'll
I
put the
suck.
link down below for everybody to
Yeah.
be able to grab that. Well, if everybody wants to get Jeff information, make sure to connect with him. He's a wealth of knowledge, a very cool guy to really be a part of him. And again, if you haven't picked up that resources to get a training on how to build an authority, make sure to grab that below. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thanks for listening and tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, like, and write a review if you're listening to the podcast digitally.